Hey there, potatoes! Spoiler warning for the entire episode. Also, check the description for content warnings. Relationships. I may be aromantic, but I do enjoy a good ship, even when it's sometimes non-canon. Today, though, we're going to talk about some canon, and mostly canon, relationships in the new Star Wars movies. Because of the family-friendly nature of the movies, I will be talking about these relationships primarily in terms of romantic orientations. Sexual orientations will be mentioned, but will not be the focus. When The Force Awakens released, there was a buzz in the asexual and aromantic community. We saw Rey and how she reacted to Finn. She's like us, the aces and aromantics said. We saw Finn and how he behaved with Rey and with Poe, and the community whispered, he's like us. Aces and gray aces, aros and gray aros, demis in both spectrums. Rey was clearly uninterested. She had a life to live, goals to achieve, and relationships were not at all part of that. Finn was awkward and unsure of even how to interact with people. He wanted to make connections, but he wasn't sure what kind of connections he was making. I was a fairly regular Tumblr user at the time, and the shipping community immediately latched on to Finn and Poe as either a wonderful potential gay relationship in the Star Wars canon, or at least the ultimate bro TP. But then, I have never seen anyone as excited to see the romantic partner as Poe was to see BB-8. Maybe the hotshot pilot is really just robo-romantic for his roly-poly pal. And then we have Kylo Ren. Damn. Jedi and their emotional repression, and what happens when the training breaks. But that is another subject entirely, and outside of the scope of our current discussion, so we'll leave it aside. What we won't leave aside is that interrogation scene. I will admit to being a little bit twisted, and in real life, I usually don't know if someone is flirting with me. But that scene was heavy with implication, and I was left wondering if J.J. Abrams and the other writers were trying to set up some kind of emotional connection between them. Whatever it was, the shipper part of my brain was left in a weird place. If they're not related, it wouldn't be a healthy relationship if something happened, right? Well, hate shipping is a thing too. Time passed. We let The Force Awakens tumble in our brains, considering the story and the characters, theorizing about everything that might happen next. And then we stood in line for The Last Jedi. Okay, pause, disclaimer time. I saw this movie twice in a weekend. I had intended to see it a third time after rewatching The Force Awakens, but I never found the time. But I loved it. The second time I saw The Last Jedi was even better than the first. Online, though, it's controversial. While The Force Awakens had critics before it was even released, complaining about the inclusion of a woman and men of color in lead roles, and complaints that it was too formulaic, just a rehash of A New Hope after it released, the controversy over The Last Jedi is different. People complain that it's formulaic, and that it's not formulaic enough. That it's not enough like the Star Wars that they grew up with. That it changes characters too much. Characters who are 30 years older, by the way. But time and trauma don't change anyone, right? That it doesn't follow the story from Force Awakens properly. I've also seen most of these points as positives, though, so I did want to at least mention that. I am aware not everyone loves this movie. I know that I'm not the only one who does love it. It's not perfect, but nothing is. There are problematic elements, but everything we love is problematic. I'm here to talk about relationships, and while I won't dwell on those other issues, I'm not pretending they don't exist. Alright, on with the show! First, Finn and Poe. Their first interaction in this film suggests that the bro TP, bestest buds idea is the canon one. While Poe is excited to see Finn up and about, it's not the same excitement you would see if he had romantic or sexual inclinations toward him. I do have to question the excited best friend vibe, though, because while they did have important interactions in the first movie, including, oh no, is he dead? Fear, and hooray, he's not dead, relief, I'm not sure they really had enough time together to justify this deep platonic connection they seem to have. Maybe Poe is just excitable, and is instant friends with everyone he meets who doesn't give him orders or try to kill him. Later in the movie, when Finn and Rose return, Poe's concern is primarily for BB-8. He'll be friends with people, but perhaps that cheerful little sphere is his only true love. Or perhaps we found a Demi, if we can trust the apparent chemistry when Poe finally really meets Rey. His reaction calm and smiling, his eyes bright, different from the energy he has shown with Finn and with BB-8. For Finn's part, when Poe greets him at the beginning of the film, his single-minded focus is Rey. Anything for her, to keep her safe, no matter what it means for him or for anyone else in the Resistance. He's the reluctant hero, his desire to protect one person pushing him into working to protect everyone else. Traditionally, this drive would put him in a romantic role opposite Rey, but he calls her his friend, and never seems to suggest there's anything more. Because we're looking at this as it stands in opposition to traditional film tropes, it's easy to consider that Finn might be a romantic, not seeing a relationship with Rey more than platonic because he just doesn't experience those attractions. Or maybe he's qua or WTF romantic, unable to distinguish between platonic and romantic attractions. Of course, they could just be friends. But then we may be looking at a setup for a very complicated love web. Too many people are involved to call it a triangle. We'll get back to that. Enter Rose. Her first encounter with Finn is one of hero worship, until she realizes he's not the great hero she thinks. The adventure she and Finn then undertake is actually one of the main character arcs of the movie. Finn grows a little. Rose is a bit of a cliché. Like I said, the movie's not perfect, and I won't try to say it is. But they have time together, and they learn about each other, and she shows him more of the good and the bad of the galaxy. The time they spend together makes it more believable when she finally professes her love. She has gone from viewing him as a hero, to seeing him as a traitor, to knowing him as a person, and that sparked a seed of love in her that she intends to give time to grow. Finn is clueless. You see it in the way he tries to sacrifice himself. You see it in the shock on his face, and the way he does not respond when she kisses him. Even if he doesn't understand, he still holds on. And in the end, he looks at her with the expression of someone who's starting to wonder if there's something more than just friendship with this person who so fiercely saved him. He'll have to sort out his feelings for Rey, and his feelings for Rose, and maybe even his feelings for Poe. We'll see what comes of that in the next movie. Now, back to that complicated love web. I made a picture. Check it out. Maybe I read too much into things. Maybe I overcomplicate things. Oh, hey, look, it's Reylo. Side note, I've had arguments about the ship name here, and I insist on Reylo, and I've also seen it in searches around the internet, because first, Rey would end up the dominant partner, and second, swapping it around makes it visually read as Kylie, and I can't handle that. In The Force Awakens, there was, as I said, some weird sort of connection between them. Last Jedi got rid of the idea that Rey is related to Kylo Ren or the Skywalkers at all, which means that we are free to let the ship sail. Side note too, the writer has in interviews left some wiggle room for the writer of Episode 9 to change Rey's parentage, saying that in the moment Kylo Ren believes what he is telling her about her parents, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There is a connection between Rey and Kylo Ren in a very literal way in Episode 8. At first, it is just the Force connection forged by Snoke to pull them together. The reactions to the connection are entirely understandable. Both startled at first, then using the connection in their own ways. Rey vents her anger over Kylo Ren's actions in the first movie, and he seeks to satisfy his curiosity about her. The moment when she sees him shirtless was meant by the writer to show she truly can see him, that she can't just sense his presence. But her reaction definitely fed my headcanon of Rey as asexual. It's very difficult to continuously rage against someone who calmly accepts your accusations and will not fight. And so Rey begins to use it to learn about Kylo Ren as well. This is where the real relationship builds, as these two, young adults, but really just kids, who have essentially been alone in one way or another most of their lives, learn about each other and begin to weave together what could tentatively be called a friendship. It's difficult for her to see him as a heartless monster when she sees the path that brought him to this point. And when time together wrapped up in the Force allows her to see that he is not as lost as everyone around them thinks. And he can't see her as just a nuisance, or as a means to finding loot, when he comes to see her as a person, as an emotional ally willing to listen, and as a potentially powerful ally in general. The Force Awakens introduced Kylo Ren as a child, emotionally compromised, throwing tantrums at a moment's notice, and harboring major daddy issues. The Last Jedi allowed the character to grow past a caricature, and revealed where the volatility and issues come from. He's cracked but not broken, and he's more interesting and likable than Episode 7 let us see. In her training, Rey goes right to the darkness, but she also comes back, and it is Kylo Ren she talks to about it. She was not swallowed up. She knows that there is a way to walk back into the light, and it gives her hope that Kylo Ren, cracked but not broken, can find that way as well. That perhaps he wants to find that way. While she doesn't know what the audience does, the pain he denies over Han Solo's death, the choice not to kill his mother as well, and the pain when he thinks she is dead, Rey can still sense the conflict in him. On another personal note, the constant use of the phrase "turn him" was probably my biggest issue in this movie. It's awkward and doesn't seem to properly fit the tone. Sure, it's faster than "guide him back to the light" or "convince him to betray me," but it kind of comes across as if they allowed a teenage vampire fanfiction writer to contribute to the dialogue. Rey and Kylo Ren each have a sense of the other as someone they can trust, someone they can rely on, someone they think may be there to stand at their side. It is in this mindset that Rey goes to Snoke's ship, the Supremacy, to find him. And it is in this mindset when, facing Snoke, Kylo Ren chooses Rey over his master. They're both struggling within themselves, and while they fight like they have trained together, perhaps a side effect of the Force connection that has been forged between them, in the aftermath, they are not willing to turn their backs on their ultimate goals in order to work together. Have you ever felt like your closest friend turned their back on you? That you held out your hand to someone, hoping to work together, and they punched you and ran away? Then you probably recognized Kylo Ren's anger in the final battle of The Last Jedi. He's hurt, and he wants to hurt in return. Rey chose the Resistance over him, and his desire to destroy the Resistance is renewed by that. But as she ushers the survivors of the battle onto the Falcon and turns, the Force connection is revealed to still be there. Snoke's death didn't destroy it, and a flicker of hope remains, especially when the look on Kylo Ren's face as they look at each other once more before Rey closes the ship is the look of a young man asking for another chance. But she has given her ultimatum, and if he wants to be at her side, he has to come to her side. There is a lot going on between characters in these movies. Except for that Reylo bit, I've just touched lightly on the relationships that are happening. And from start to finish, this is largely subjective. Maybe you didn't see the same things on Ren's face that I did. Maybe you're in the camp that thinks Rose has no chance with Finn because, even after her desperate attempt to save him and her confession of love, he's still only interested in Rey. Maybe you think my A-spec interpretation of most of the characters is way off base. That's fine. We're free to interpret what we see in movies in our own way. But I hope you're willing to give my perspective some thought, and maybe it will allow you to see the new Star Wars trilogy and its characters in a light you might not have considered before. We'll see what comes of them in Episode 9. Until next time, potatoes, this has been a look through the rainbow lens.